Today I'm going to show you an easy way to make chicken tamales. This is going to be good. So recently I posted a tamales video and someone asked for chicken tamales, and I had a 5-pound pack of chicken breast that I'm going to cook in the slow cooker, so I decided to make some. Here I'm adding like 1.5 to 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon powder to the chicken breast. I'm just going to shake in some garlic powder. Of course I'm eyeballing everything because I just want to cook this. Here I'm going to shake in some onion powder. By the way, you could use fresh garlic and onion in place of this. I'm going to add 2 small dried bay leaves going in. Honestly, when I was cooking this, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the chicken breast, and then I thought chicken tamales. So now I'm adding 10 to 12 guajillo peppers that I cleaned and some water. And I'm just going to cover it with a lid, cook that on high until it is done. And once it's done, I'm going to remove the dried guajillo peppers from the pot, and I'm really going to separate everything: the peppers, the chicken, and the broth. You'll need all of this for your tamales. So I want to share something with you. When I make chicken tamales, I actually like using boneless chicken thighs. I don't like the breast meat for tamales, but I had a frozen pack of chicken breast in my freezer, and I did not have boneless chicken thighs, so that's what I'm using chicken breast today. But if you're going to ask me for my opinion, which you might not ask me, I prefer dark meat for chicken tamales because it's just a lot more juicy and tender. It really holds up when you're making tamales, but there's nothing wrong with chicken breast. I know the saturated fat content is a lot less, but I'm just working with what I have today. So I'm adding all of my cooked chicken breast into the bowl. And after this last one, what I'm going to do is ladle all of this broth and just strain it to get out anything that I didn't fish out with my tongs. And then after I've separated everything, here's what's left in the strainer. I'm going to add that right back into the chicken, and you'll want to shred the chicken. You could also just chop it. It just depends on what you prefer. Here's my broth, here's the chilies, and now I'm moving on to the husks. So these are very dry, and you'll want to clean these, separate the leaves, give them a rinse, and then you'll want to boil them and let them steep. So here in a pot, I just added all of my rinsed corn husks. But as you can see, nature always finds a way. So this is why you'll want to boil them to make them soft and pliable, but you'll also want to rinse really well. So I'm going to boil them and then turn off the heat. And now I'm just going to add this right on top to keep them down and let them steep until softened. Okay, so I'm going to work on the puree here. So I'm adding all of my softened guajillo chiles. By the way, you could use a combination of ancho, pasilla. I do that as well, but today I'm going with all guajillos that I've removed the stems and seeds. Now I'm going to add whatever's left in that bowl. I'm also going to add some cumin seeds that I've kind of crushed and grinded up with black peppercorn going in. Here I'm going to add some of that broth. And this will just help everything puree. And now you'll want to blend and puree well. Now into a preheated pot with cooking oil, I'm going to simmer that and save some for the masa, by the way. And give that a mix. You'll also want to taste, season, and salt everything to your preference. So here's my shredded chopped chicken going in. And this is actually a lot of chicken. Technically for the recipe, you need about 3 pounds of cooked meat. Like 2.5 to 3 pounds. And just by looking at this chicken breast meat, you can tell it's on the drier side. It's not super dry, but if you're working with dark meat, it just works a lot better in my opinion. So I added some broth. Now I'm going to salt to taste. And I suggest you do the same because I don't have your taste buds. And a lot of people have just different preferences. So give this a mix, taste it, add some more broth if you're working with chicken breast, because you do want this to be tender and moist going into your tamal. Okay, so now this is done. You'll want to set aside until you need it. Now I am going to use my cookbook. For those of you that have it, know I have a recipe for tamales, and these are the ratios and ingredients that you could use as a guide. Now you can adjust the ratios of like fat to liquid, the type of meat and seasoning, but this is just a guide for you to use when you want to make this at home. Okay, So here's the rest of my broth, and I added some back into the blender cup. This is going to go into the masa, and this gives the masa flavor and that orangey red color. I really enjoy making tamales this way. My grandmother did this as well, so that's what I'm sticking with. I'm going with lard today. I'll be using about 8 ounces or half of this block. And the Maseca instant masa corn flour is what I'm using. They even make a coarse grind for tamales, but I just like the one that's for the corn tortillas. So I have 4 cups in there. I'm going with my baking powder and salt. I'll put ingredients and measurements in the description below. Give that a mix. Now I'm going to add my softened lard. You could also opt for shortening if you don't want to use lard. And I'm just going to sort of mix that in as well. And some of you might find that you want more lard in this recipe. Go for it. It's really up to you. So I have that puree broth mix and it's going in. My husband's helping me out here because my hands are, kind of busy with the masa. And I'm just going to mix this by hand. You use the method that you prefer, whether it's a stand mixer, whether it's a wooden spoon. It all works. I'm just a creature of habit. I like working with clean hands. So I'm going in with more warm water mixed with the puree because it needs it. And you'll find that when you're making your own tamales, you really want this to be moisturized. It is dry instant corn flour for masa, so it takes a lot of moisture to get soft. But eventually you'll want to start whisking and mixing with your hand. And once it's mixed, and if the ratio's right, it doesn't stick to your hand. That lets you know that it's a good fat to broth and masa ratio. So I'm going to cover this with cling film and let it rest until I need it. But you want to cover it so it doesn't dry out. And even if it does dry out, add more broth to it. Okay, so my corn husks have steeped for several hours, so I'm going to remove my molcajete, pour out some of the water. The molcajete just helps to keep the hojas or the corn husks submerged. So put that to the side. And now I'm going to pour out the rest of that water, and it is kind of dirty. So I'm going to individually rinse these very well and place them in a bowl. And that's how you prep them. Softened, pliable, and rinsed. Okay, so all of my corn husks are ready, and you'll want to work on the smooth side. There's always a rough side and a smooth side, and actually I'm going to keep this kind of covered. I'll expose a little bit, but feel the corn husks, and you can adjust the size, rip off pieces if you need to, and I'm going to find the smoother side, and that's the side that I'm going to spread the masa. I'm using my clean hands. Sometimes I use a spoon. A lot of you like to use those spreaders that you purchase from the store. Some of you use the tortilla press method. I find my hands a lot easier to work with. Okay, so just kind of press it out. Still isn't sticking to my hand, so that's a good ratio for the lard in the mix. And now I'm just going to add my shredded or chopped chicken breast right in the center. And then you'll just want to fold it over carefully. And I like a lot of meat to masa ratio, but it really is up to you. Again, it's up to your preference. Fold it over, and then on the seam part, you kind of fold it over and you fold up onto the seam. So just like this, give it a press, and here's the seam side going up with the husk, and that's it. I'm going to place this on a baking sheet, seam side down, and repeat the process. So I want to mention, there are so many methods to gauge if your masa is ready. I've seen people do the float test where they get a glass of water, put some of the masa in water, and if it floats, it's ready. Well, the reason why it does that is because you've aerated it, you whipped it, and the fat ratio or lard ratio in your masa is a good ratio. Fat floats. So yeah, you definitely can use that. I just trust the recipe that I always use, but definitely explore ways to perfect your tamales. Okay, so again, just folding it over, and then you fold once again on the seam, place it down, repeat the process. So today I managed to make 43 tamales, and I do have some chicken breast or meat filling left over. I did go through all of the masa, and the 1-pound bag of corn husks did leave extra, but for this recipe, 50 corn husks works. So I have my pot with a steamer basket, I'm going to flip over this little bowl and just start stacking the tamales upright around the bowl. Honestly, for this recipe, I think a 16-quart steamer pot works. I don't even know how large this pot is. It's just the one that I use when I'm making. So last one going in, kind of stack them around, fit them in, and then I'm going to use extra corn husks and just top all of my tamales. Doing this really does trap the steam, but it also protects the exposed part of the tamal from getting condensation back into it. That'll just prolong the cook process if you keep saturating the masa. Okay, lid going on, and I've already filled the bottom with water. Gonna turn the heat on and let that come up to a boil. Once it starts to boil, I like to lower the heat and keep it at a constant rapid simmer and cook for an hour and 15 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes. Now, I know these aren't done yet, but I want to show you what happens when the tamal is undercooked. You got to see what it looks like. Again, these are just ways to gauge the cooking process or the entire process of tamales. There's little things you can do. So I'm going to remove one carefully because I can feel that it's still kind of soft. It hasn't firmed up. I'm going to continue cooking those, but let me show you. The tamal should open up easily and pull away from the corn husks when it's done, but here you can see it's still sticky and it's stuck. So that is an indication that you need to cook your tamales longer. Cook time always varies how tightly you pack the pot, how your heat or the steam is going through and in and out of the pot. There's so many variables. So I'm going to put this back and continue cooking. It took an hour and 20 minutes to cook these. I'm going to shut off the fan here. And I know these are done. I've tested them. I make these all the time, but yours might take longer. Again, there's so many variables to cooking tamales. You just have to keep cooking and use the methods that work for you. So I'm going to remove all of those corn husks off the top and start removing these and placing them on a baking sheet. And they might still seem like they need a longer cook time, but as they set after you remove them, it does kind of continue to cook. So after these have set for about 20 minutes, they're ready to serve. I'm going to show you what one looks like so you can see the difference of how it comes out of the corn husks, and it's very hot. But see how easily I can open up my tamal and it just kind of comes out without sticking? This is how you know it's done. And these smell amazing. And I know I said chicken breast meat is drier, but if you do this right, it's still so good. So I hope you give this recipe a try. I hope you like it, and thanks for watching.